I always talk about this with budgets. To be on a strict plan and not deviate from that, in my mind, is impossible, right? We are not robots. We are humans. And we have human experiences and human emotions, and we live human lives. So understanding and recognizing that this is going to happen is also a huge piece to this. So what we need to do is, even before we go into the store or before we go online to add items to our cart, it's really important to just slow down, take a few breaths, and check in with yourself. What's going on that day? How do you feel? I think these constant check-ins are so important. We don't take the time to do that. Our culture, and especially mom culture, we're just on this treadmill all day long, and we don't give ourselves a chance to hop off and slow it down a little bit. So checking in with yourself and saying, what else might be going on? I know I want to buy something even though we don't need it. Like, what else might be going on underneath that?
Welcome to the Marriage and Motherhood Podcast. I'm your host, Michelle Perda. As a marriage coach who's married with 3 kids, I know how much parenthood could change a marriage. If flirting, laughing, and having fun together feels like a thing of the past, then I'm here to teach you that marriage doesn't have to feel so hard with your parents, and your marriage can thrive even when you're in the season of raising kids. Whether you're in a good place in your marriage and you just want to continue growing together, or you're wondering if you even like your spouse anymore, this podcast has something for you. Join me here each week as we dive into what it takes to help your marriage grow, and maybe even do a 180. You'll learn ways to handle conflict better, bring that spark back into your relationship, as well as learn how to improve other areas of your life from my lovely guest experts. Are you ready for the next stage of your life and marriage? Let's dive in. Hello. Welcome back to another episode of the Marriage and Motherhood Podcast. So it is 2025, and I want to spend all of January just helping set you up for the best year ever, okay? Because we're all about growth on this podcast, whether it is personal growth, relational growth, whatever else kind of growth there is. We're all about that. And I'm super excited to have my guest here today because we're going to be diving into money. Okay. Every year we say we're going to do better with certain aspects of our life, and money is one of those things. Whether I'm going to save better, I'm going to, actually be more conscious about how I'm spending money. And so we're going to talk about our relationship with money and why that matters. We're going to talk about retail therapy. We're going to be talking about how we can take back our control of our money and feel more empowered when it comes to utilizing what really makes the world go round, which is money. And so here I have Megan Dwyer. She is a certified financial planner and a money coach. Welcome, Megan. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited.
Yes, me too. I'm sure I'm going to learn tons from you. But before we dive in, can you please share with us where you live, how old your kids are, and what made you want to get into financial planning?
Yeah. So I live in Boston, Massachusetts. So as we were just saying before the recording, it's starting to get cold here. No snow on the ground yet, but definitely getting chilly. I have 2 boys that are now 8 and 6. And they are awesome. We are full on into sports mode, basketball, soccer. I mean, we're doing it all. So they keep me very busy. But in addition to that, as you were saying, I am also a certified financial planner. That is my day job. I'm a money coach that, which is more recent. I got that money coach certification to do that on the side. But I started to get into this work. And it wasn't after college. I didn't go to school to learn about money. I really honestly, I needed a job when I got out of college, and I got a job at a big financial institution, and I knew nothing. I knew literally nothing. I was the girl that got my first credit card at a concert so I could get a free t-shirt. And which I'm sure, probably a lot of us do because we don't know.
The 20% off.
Exactly. Literally. I wasn't taught anything about money growing up. In my house, you're kind of, I feel like, stereotypical. We don't talk about money except for maybe that one day a week, one day a month when dad does the bills. And in that case, it's always just stay away from him because he's probably going to be grumpy. Right. So that was sort of my mindset, I guess, that I had around money. Mom and dad never really talked about it, although here and there I would hear them maybe a quick argument, or if I was at the store with my mom and I'd say, I want this, my mom would say, well, no, you can't, but we have to wait till dad gets paid before we can do anything. Right. So we never went without, we still had our trips and we would do our family events and all of that stuff. I didn't go without, but I also didn't really have a good understanding of how money worked, or in my mind, really have a good relationship with money. Um, and so as I got older and I graduated college and I got out into the real world, I got a job in a financial services company, and I was like, I got curious. And that was really where it all started. So that's when I started to take the CFP classes to become a certified financial planner. And I learned a lot. It was really more about, I was doing it to kind of be able to help my clients, but I was also doing it to be able to help me on a personal level to understand, like, what is my 401k? How does this work? And taxes, like, nobody teaches you taxes, right? So
Yeah.
it really was personally very interesting and very fulfilling. And it really helped to kind of set the framework for the work that I do now.
That's incredible. And I'm so amazed by how different each of our money stories can be, because
Yeah.
I grew up the exact opposite.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so like my parents got divorced, and had they not, then I don't think I would have the financial literacy that I do. It's because they got
Yeah.
divorced where my mom really had to like step up and take
Yep.
charge, because what broke them up was surrounding money. And
Mm-hmm.
so she became the breadwinner, and I just remember so many meals where she would try and embed financial literacy into me, whether it's
Mm,
talking about stocks or 401k, or about saving and putting away. And I'm like, okay, like, stop. It's so annoying.
that
But now as an adult, I'm like, oh, that was really amazing that she did that, because listening to your previous episodes on other podcasts, or even on your own podcast, I'm like, I guess that's not the norm, that people grew up like that. So I'm just like so intrigued by listening to different people's history and relationship with money. And so let's talk about why that even matters. Like, why does our relationship with money matter? And for those of you who are like, what do you mean relationship with money? You don't date them, like, can you share what that means, why it matters, and how that relationship forms in the first place?
Absolutely. Yeah. And first of all, I just want to say how incredible it is that you had such an empowered mom. I mean, that's
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah.
And I believe, I'm guessing because of her circumstances, having gone through a
Absolutely.
divorce, it kind of forced her to do that. And she was totally on board. Right.
Mm-hmm.
But I see that a lot with clients. Like, I work with a lot of women who have either gone through a divorce or are widowed and are now, as a result, having to step in. But I wish that so many women could could start with that instead of having to have gone through that life experience or that certain event, right, to cause that. So that's what I'm all about, is empowering women to start now, because you don't
Yeah.
know what's going to happen in life, right? So that's amazing, and I'm so glad that you had that background growing up. But talking about our relationship with money, yeah, I mean, you said it earlier. Money is something that we can't go without, right?
Mm-hmm.
So whether we like it or not, money makes the world go around. Money is something we have to deal with every single day. It's how we pay our bills. It's how we live in our houses. It's how we eat, right? It's how we have clothes on our body. It's all of these things. And so if there's something that you are dealing with on an every single day basis, whether you realize it or not, you do kind of have a relationship with it, right? So it's our choice whether we want that relationship to be difficult or challenging, or if we want it to be more positive or more, thriving and working for us, right? So simply put, I think our relationship with money is how we relate to money, right? And so I think if you were to just do a quick kind of like gut check on yourself right now, on how do I relate to money if I've never done this before, if I've never thought about this before, this concept before, just pause for a second and think about just think about the concept of money and how you interact with it in your life, right? When you get a bill in the mail, or you get that email that it's time to pay the bill and it's due on this date, do you feel positive? Do you feel neutral? Or do you feel this like gut wrenching anxiety in your stomach, right? Um, you could do that. That's just with bills, right? Because bills are something that we need to pay every day, right? But when it comes to the holidays, right? We've just gone through this holiday season. Again, is that something that like brings you anxiety or like, again, makes your stomach hurt? Which some people, I say that's because like I when I get anxiety around certain things, like I do, that's like the physical manifestation of those feelings in my body. Or, are you totally okay with it? And you're like, I'm so happy that I spent all this money on my family and maybe myself, or, it just, or do you have nothing, or are you completely neutral, or you're like, I don't know, I'm somewhere in the middle, right? So doing that kind of quick gut check, I think will help you at least start to think about this concept of how do I relate to money? Where does our relationship with money form? I think it starts for everybody in childhood. I think it starts with how we were raised. But I think there's two aspects to this. It's certainly how we were raised in our house. And if we had a positive interaction with money. And I think in your case, it seems like it was almost to the extent that it was like annoying, right? Your mom, you were like, Mom, chill back a little bit. I just want to have my breakfast. I don't want to talk about 401ks right now. Or it was, I would say it was more neutral in my house because it just wasn't talked about, right? Or I had this idea that I equated money to stress, but at the time I didn't quite know what stress was, right? So I think I was still too young to really like understand. So it starts in childhood, and I think it starts with our families and how we were raised and the things that we learned from the people in our small circle, right, growing up. But then it also, I think, is formed as we get older and we move out of our houses and maybe we go away to college, or we get our first job or in our first apartment or whatever it is, and we're kind of out of our kind of central family of origin, and we start to see how the world around us all interacts with money and the messages that we're getting from our culture. And we were talking about marketing, and like there's so many aspects of that impact how we think and feel about money, as well as our peers, right? So who's in our life right now? And are these our friends? Are these, like work coworkers? And how do these people seem to interact with money? And how does that shape how you interact with money?
Yeah, I mean, I think money naturally brings this like air of comparison a lot
Mm-hmm.
too, like keeping up with the Joneses. Like, I remember when I was working in corporate, like you don't know anyone's financial situations. You just see what they
Right?
have and
Yeah.
what they do.
Yep.
And so if people are like, flaunting LV bags or,
Yep.
Coach or Kate Spade or, whatever, you're like, oh, I kind of want to fit in. I want to do that. Or are people purchasing things from Express or Nordstrom or, different places? You try and like, you feel like you have to match them to
Totally.
fit in and blend
Yeah.
in. Um, and, when you talk about childhood, like the thoughts that immediately rushed in was like how my mom would be very, very frugal about the things that we can control. And so, as financially literate and empowered as she is and was, she still was like, turn off all the lights if you're not using them. And like,
Yep.
or, oh, we used a lot more water this month than last month. What's going on? Let's be more conscious about, long showers or, whatever. And I find myself doing that, I'm like,
Is that
something,
funny?
it is so funny. It's like something inside me. It's almost like this like angst that comes out where it's like, oh my God, someone left a light on. What are they doing? Go turn it off. No one's using it. We're spending money where we're not even using the thing that we're spending money on, even
Yeah.
though it's like pennies, but still, it counts. And so I think it's so fascinating how we are so influenced by the people we are choosing to be surrounded by and the people we didn't have a choice to be surrounded
Exactly.
by.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah.
I mean, when we're little, right, we're so like malleable, right? Like where we don't even know ourselves, right? We're just learning, we're becoming these people. And then of course we're going to be impacted and influenced by the people around us. And especially if certain people in your life, like a parent or a grandparent, another family member who you're very close to has particularly strong opinions one way or the other around one area, of course, it's just you can't help but naturally, inherit that or take that on.
Right. And that becomes our normal, right?
Yeah.
Until we expose ourselves to other people, we're like, hey, that's not normal.
Or until
or
we
it's just,
start to,
yeah,
until we realize that maybe those thoughts and beliefs and habits aren't working for us anymore. And then
right.
it's on us to work through and challenge them. Like, where did these come from? Right. And
Exactly.
is this actually what I believe or how I want to run my life, basically?
Yeah, yeah. So I know that you love to talk about how self care and money go hand in hand. What does self worth have to do with how we relate to money, how we handle it, and how we feel about it? And how can we start to feel more empowered around money if we have a more unhealthy relationship with money?
Yeah. And so I think, we often think that self care and money maybe are two completely opposite things, right? Because I feel like,
Self care spends or self care requires money sometimes,
right,
but yeah,
right,
what do they have to do with each other?
exactly. So I think in our culture right now, right, and especially as mothers, we are told that feeling stressed or feeling overwhelmed or anxious or whatever it is, right, it should be combated with things like getting a massage or the bubble bath, right? Or I love it. I love, we've all seen those commercials with like the decadent piece of chocolate, right? We think this is what we're taught from very young ages is what like taking self-care is or what taking care of ourselves is, right? These are all things in my mind that are marketed to us as a way to improve our physical or our mental health. And I don't disagree with those thoughts, right? Like, I do think that there is nothing wrong with getting a massage, please. Like, that's lovely if you can do it, or having a piece of chocolate. But I think we're kind of missing ultimately, like, the main point here. I think self care, in my mind, is more like self parenting. It's about doing right by yourself even when it's annoying and you don't feel like doing it. I think of it as like eating your vegetables, right? Like, you may not want to do it, but you know that it's good for you and you know that you should do it. And self-care in my mind like encompasses all different parts of our lives, not just that physical and the mental. I think we have needs, like, we're complex, right? Humans are multidimensional. We have needs beyond just those physical or mental parts of us. We have emotional needs and social needs, spiritual, personal, work needs, right? And we also have, in my mind, financial needs. All of these needs require their own, in my mind, like unique aspect of care. And this is important, I think, to recognize because it requires us to be intentional around all these different areas of our lives, not just some. And so when it comes to like taking care of ourselves, the self-care and finances, I think we often think of self-care as kind of like this instant gratification, right? And it's again, go buy yourself. We'll talk about this in a little bit, but go buy yourself that quick fix, right, at the store, or go try to do whatever, go impulse shop or do something to try to make yourself feel better in the moment. But in my mind, self care is not about that quick fix. Self care is about treating our holistic self and not necessarily indulging in those kind of temporary fixes. It's like the concept of like putting a band-aid on it versus like treating the actual like issue at hand. Like, what's the root here? So the goal is, when it comes to, in my mind, like self-care and finances, is we want to be able to tend to both the present, like our present selves, like here in the now, and helping to work through the emotions and whatever we're going through in this moment, while also not forgetting about our financial, like our future selves in that. And we can see that from a financial perspective. So the concepts that I kind of talk about are concepts that I think are universal And I look at it from the angle of finances, but they're also concepts that I think that we could apply to all these other areas of our lives.
No, I love that. I mean, this is just like another, tally mark for why we need to develop ourselves, become more self-aware, and deal with our issues rather than look to these like things that feel good, like the chocolate. By the way, I love C's walnut squares.
Oh,
They
yeah.
are
Delicious.
amazing. Like, those are my go-to, like, you know, period chocolates.
Yeah.
Anyway,
I'm a peanut butter cup girl myself. I do anything with peanut butter. I'm
I
all
cannot
over. Yeah.
mix peanut butter with chocolate. I like them separate. For some reason, I cannot do them together.
Oh.
I know that makes me like an oddball, but that's just me. But the things that make us feel good, they have a place and they have a time. But
Yeah.
it is what it is. It's a form of escape.
Yeah.
Right? It's a temporary, I wouldn't even say it's a fix, because it's not a solution.
It's not fixing anything, right?
It's a distraction.
Exactly. It's just trying to pull you out of however it is that you're feeling in the moment, right?
Right. And so it sounds like financial literacy and just taking care of our financial health is also tied to our own well-being.
Absolutely.
Are we being honest with how we're doing internally? Are we taking care of our physical? Are we taking care of our mental, our emotional body? And if you're avoidant, I'm imagining that you're going to see a lot of these things come out when it comes to your relationship with money. You probably, do a lot of retail therapy. So let's kind of like dive into that.
Yeah.
Right?
I was going to add too, or you might, another way that you will know if you're avoidant here is if you feel guilt or you feel shame. I think shame is one of those huge concepts that women feel, and we shove it down and we shove it down and we shove it down. And we try to find other ways to kind of distract us from that shame. But when you start to peel back these layers and recognize like what is not being treated here, like what need is not being met, then I think you start to realize that shame starts to dwindle a little bit. And I'm a huge Brene Brown fan. So she talks all about that. Like if when shame is contained, right, it just continues to grow. And when shame is out in the light and you talk about it and you start to, even if talk about it either with someone else or just start to have that awareness of where and why and how it got there, right, then you start to recognize that you're not alone and other people are feeling this too. And, we're all in this together.
Yeah, absolutely. It's just like anxiety, I have this book that I bought my son. I don't remember what it's called, but it's about how, anxiety can often be invisible, but when we start to talk about it with people, the feeling of the weight that it has on us starts to shrink. Yeah. And we start to realize that we're not alone. People feel anxious about different things. And when we speak it out into existence and have people listen to us, then it doesn't seem so big anymore, because our mind does funny things. It kind of like over exaggerates things sometimes. Where it's like, it's really actually not as big as I thought it was. It just felt really big.
Right. It's almost this sense of relief, right?
Yes.
That it's like we feel like we're holding on to so much, right? And I know this as moms, and I've been there and I do this all the time myself. Like it just sometimes the weight feels so heavy. But then if you talk to somebody else and realize that they're going through, it may not be exactly the same, but something very similar, you're like, oh, okay, everybody's got something. Everybody's holding on to something. And it allows you to kind of take that weight off, right?
Yeah, to let go. Yeah.
Another piece to this too that I think is I talk about in pretty much every episode of my podcast is self-compassion. And Dr. Kristen Neff, I had her on the show. She's she is the pioneer in self-compassion research, and she is incredible. She talks about there's three main components of self-compassion. The first is mindfulness, right? Which is, I think, a lot of what we've just been talking about here is this like idea of being aware of what's going on, like being in the moment, not just doing things on default. Mindfulness, kindness. So kindness is, actually treating ourselves the way that we would treat maybe our kids or somebody else who we know is struggling. Um, be that for yourself, which can be easier said than done. I know for a lot of these, like, just like me, these high achieving women out there. But yet it's so necessary. And then the last piece is common humanity. And that is so powerful in my mind because it's recognizing that we are not alone. Everybody screws up. Everybody yells at their kids. Everybody makes mistakes with their money, right? Like, we're human. We're all in this together. So those concepts are something that I try to often circle back to or wrap up in almost every episode or every conversation I have, because I think it's just so powerful and such an important message for women to know.
Mm-hmm. And I think that last one is a great segue into the topic of retail therapy. Like our humanity is that we are full of emotions. Like that's what colors our life for comfortable or uncomfortable, right? So we tend to buy when we feel down, like maybe we've been fighting with our husbands a lot, or maybe our kids have been especially challenging lately, or something just got us down, we got disappointed somehow, and we're like, I'm just gonna go take a trip to Target, that's gonna cheer me up because I love going into that one section and just admiring everything that's beautiful and just throw things in the cart and feel good. But also we feel like it feels good to shop or buy things or go out when good things happen too, like maybe we're celebrating someone who is getting divorced or getting, pregnant, or we got a promotion, or we met a goal of ours, like, oh yeah, I have that weight loss goal, or oh yeah, I have an exercise goal. And let's go celebrate. Let's go out for drinks, or let's go on a shopping spree. Let's go buy that purse that I've been eyeing.
Right. I was going to say, buy that new bag that you've been looking at. Yeah.
Right. And so we can kind of have this like impulse kind of thing going on when it comes to retail therapy in the name of self-care, right? So can we talk about that? Like, why does it seem like the way we buy is tied to how we feel? And why does buying stuff feel so good? Because I know I personally love to buy stuff. If I had like unlimited money, I would just shop every day because it's just so fun. Whether it's for me or someone else, doesn't even matter. I just love to buy stuff. It's like, it gives you endorphins.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm going to take this in two parts. So I first wanted to address, you talked about at the beginning of this question, you talked about emotions. Mm-hmm. And I really want to start there because I think that is that drives this whole rest of this conversation, right? So as a culture, and in particular for women, right, we have been taught not to have emotions, or we have been taught that emotions are a bad thing, right? And I am going to just use an example. I can't tell you the number of times that I have cried in the bathroom at my corporate jobs because I felt like I had to hide. I couldn't let anybody know that I was upset, or frankly, that I had emotions at all. It was like you had to be kind of stoic, right? For the most part. Yet all that's doing is just dismissing it, right? This is just shoving it down and allowing us to not acknowledge what's really going on, right? And so I recognized as a mom myself that I wanted to, I'll have my kids actually embrace their emotions rather than pretend that their emotions aren't something that they should have, right? So I personally believe that our emotions are a superpower. I believe that they are leading us in the direction of what's important. But we have a job here, right? So our jobs are to stop and just pause. And what I mean by the stop is just pause for a second and start to think about what our emotions are trying to tell us. What are they? What is causing us to feel the way that we do right now, right? Positive, negative, sad, upset, whatever it is. Okay. So once we figure out, okay, what might actually be going on underneath this, our job is to learn how to manage those emotions in a healthy way, right? And what you define what healthy is for you. And this is something we can talk more about, especially as we get into the retail therapy conversation. And make sure that those emotions are 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 not dismissed and are acknowledged and validated. That I think is, for me anyway, the most important piece, because I can't tell you also the number of times as a child it was like, stop crying, Megan, stop crying. I don't want to hear you cry. Right. I feel like crying is not only a release, but it's also, I think, a way of healing and a way of relating to ourselves and the world around us. So some people may cry more than others. I'm just wired. I'm a crier. That's just who I
I
am.
am totally a crier. Cry when I'm sad, frustrated, happy,
Yep.
mad, like
Yep.
everything.
And it just overwhelmed. That's
Yeah.
what mostly when I do it, I just feel like there's so much going on in my world, and I just have to, like, it just keeps piling on inside, and I just have to release. And so crying, I think, is a great thing. And I think if we can just, again, validate those feelings and be like, yep, you are really overwhelmed right now. You are feeling anxious. You've got a lot on your plate right now. Validating those, and then also saying, allowing those to help us go to the next place and say, what can I learn from this? Maybe I do need to take something off my plate. Maybe I do need to ask for help in this area or this area, right? So I think emotions are, it's just really important that that's said, because I feel like a lot of people just kind of dismiss emotions. And emotions are, in my mind, extremely important. And that's why I'm so glad that there are movies out now like Inside Out, Inside Out 2, that are creating, are making this more of a cultural norm rather than something that's just like something to be shoved aside and left at home, and you just put on this armor every day and go into the world, right? And so when it comes to retail therapy, when it comes to this impulse buying, right? Yeah, of course, like I can't help it, right? Like sometimes my kids had, they both just had report cards and they both did really well. And so we were like, oh, let's go celebrate. Let's go get frozen yogurt, right? And that's not really a big deal in my mind, because it's, we're talking like $10 here, not like buying a big purse or buying something expensive. But I think it's a similar concept. So we're humans. Like, I think we need to expect that we're going to have emotions. We're going to have ups and downs throughout the day and throughout our weeks and our lives, right? And so expecting us to not have emotions, to not be able to be kind of, in my mind, I always talk about this with budgets, but or you can think about it with diets or something too, but to be on a strict plan and not deviate from that, in my mind, is impossible, right? We are not robots. We are humans, and we have human experiences and human emotions and feelings, and we live human lives. So I think understanding and recognizing that this is going to happen is also a huge piece to this. So when we find ourselves in a store or in the checkout line, and there's all these like things in front of us, and we are shiny new objects, as I like to call it, right? And we get excited. I think what we need to do is even before we go into the store or before we go online and we add items to our cart, it's really important to just slow down, right? Take a few breaths and check in with yourself. What's going on that day? How do you feel? Right? I think these like constant check-ins are so important. Asking ourselves, how are we feeling? What's going on right now? We don't take the time to do that. I think, again, our culture, and especially mom culture too, we're just on this treadmill all day long, and we don't give ourselves a chance to hop off and slow it down a little bit. So checking in with yourself and saying, okay, how am I feeling right now? And what else might be going on besides just this, like I'm in the car right now and I have this urge to go into Nordstrom or whatever store it is, Target. And I just I know I want to buy myself something, or I know I want to buy something even though we don't need it. Like, what else might be going on underneath that? I think you talked about kind of using our money in an aligned way, and there is also, in my mind, there we can build in room to be impulsive. To be perfectly honest, I love going to Target. I love the idea of not knowing what I'm going to find, and especially at a store that you like their stuff, and you get excited about the potential opportunity of finding something. I think there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. I just feel like we need to plan for it. So put it in your budget. Create a little. What I do is I have different buckets within kind of my savings accounts. And I have a bucket for just like a fun bucket, just like a, this is money that I want to spend when I want to spend it, right? It's for me. It's a me bucket. And I don't know, I put in like $20 a week or something like that. And I think everybody can, this is all nuanced and you can find your own little piece to that or way that it will work for you in your life. But I feel like if you can plan as best as possible and then you've got that money sitting there and then you don't have to feel this like guilt and shame for it afterwards, right? I like it. I like to shop. I like to physically go into stores and feel things and touch things. And I'm a big like visual person. And I feel like a lot of people are, and we shouldn't have to say no or completely cut that part out of our lives or restrict us as a result. I think that's just going to backfire on us, just like a diet.
Yeah, no, totally. Because like when it comes to diet, there's like the yo-yo dieting, right? It's like you're really, really good, and then you fall off the bandwagon. And budgeting is kind of like the same thing, right? You kind of like get off track and get carried away with retail therapy or whatever, and then it's time to pay the bills. You're like, shit, how did my bill get so high? Like, and then you look back, you're like, nope, I did all this stuff.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. And I will add too, I think one of the questions that you had said was, why does buying stuff feel so good?
Yeah.
And I think buying stuff feels so good because, at least me personally, I'm not treating myself the way that I would like to be treated all the time. Mm-hmm. And so we buy, like when I'm constantly again on the treadmill and I'm going, giving of everybody else and not really allowing myself to receive. And when I say receive doesn't have to be like, giant Christmas gifts. Receive can be literally just allowing myself to receive kindness, like from myself, be appreciative, be grateful, right? Just start to think about like, okay, when I make a mistake, instead of beating myself and saying, oh my God, you're so stupid, Megan, just being like, okay, everyone makes mistakes. How are we going to fix this? How are we going to work through this? Right? It's just treating yourself differently. And I think if you incorporate more of that into your everyday, you won't necessarily need the same high that you get from buying yourself like this special gift because you think you deserve it.
Yeah,
you feel like you deserve it. Because if you're treating yourself the way you deserve to be treated on an ongoing or recurring basis, then I think these one-off splurges, if you will be less. And I think it'll just become more of a part of the way of living, is treating yourself with respect and kindness.
Yeah, and I think this is deeply tied to our connection to food as well, because sometimes people do emotional eating, or if they're bored, they're like, oh, I just need to go eat something. Yep. But if we take the time to figure out, well, what am I lacking in my life? Where am I not giving myself permission to care for myself? Yes. Whether it's, regular movement or having a hobby, like allowing yourself to have a hobby.
Yeah.
Right? Like I recently just started like this paint by numbers thing. It's going to take like 12 hours. I am probably like, 4 hours into it, but it's like, I have never done that before, like in past years, it's just like, oh, I need to be productive because that's how I am valued as a woman. But now doing what I do, I've learned, no, that is not how I'm valued as a woman, like I can have great relationships with my family and with myself. And that starts with fostering my own personal interests, like how I would do for my kids, how I take them to dance and swim and basketball. Like, what am I doing for myself that is just for the simple answer of because I want to, because I want to develop this, because I am worth it.
Because I matter, right?
Yeah.
And I think it's so easy for women and moms to get caught up in that, right? I think when I had you on my show, we talked about you read a ton of books, right? Yeah. And so reading books is one. I started doing puzzles. I never would have thought, and this is like a 1,000-piece puzzle, and my kids helped me with it a little bit here and there, but I was like, I'm just going to do this puzzle because I feel like doing this puzzle right now. Right. I'm not going to, no one asked me for things. I'm not going to go just start putzing around the house just to feel productive or feel like I've accomplished something, I'm going to just focus on this puzzle right now for an hour. And that's what I feel like doing. And I think it's taken a lot of time for me to get to that place where I feel worthy and deserving of that.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So, listeners, if you haven't gathered by the end of this talk that your relationship with yourself matters so much more than you think, and it affects so much more than you think, like, I hope that you're really taking this all in. Like, absorb what you have heard from this episode, because your money is being affected by it. Your health is being affected by it. Your kids, your marriage, your everything. So, like, take the time to get to know yourself. Let yourself be more aware. I know it can be uncomfortable if you're not used to it, but just like with anything new, you get used to it. It doesn't feel so new, so foreign, so awkward, so uncomfortable anymore. It just becomes your new norm. And we want to help you develop that so that you can live a more aligned life. And what do I mean by that? I mean, making decisions that you can actually look back on and be like, yeah, I own that decision. And I don't feel any guilt or remorse over it.
Yes,
You know,
exactly.
like, that's how we can feel good about our lives. It's when we feel that remorse and guilt and resentment over like how we chose to live our lives because we prized our, current reality over our future of, that's the lack of prioritization. That's what it really is when we're more fixated on how do we feel right now? Oh, it's uncomfortable. I don't want to do that.
Right.
Over like, oh yeah, it's uncomfortable right now, but I know it's going to set me up for something better for the future. Like, I just took my 8-year-old to get his flu shot, right? And he has anxiety and he also has sensory processing disorder. So getting a shot is like a really big deal.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, look, you're going to get a shot today, but it's to make sure that your body can, handle the flu better and we don't end up at the hospital or whatever. He goes, but I don't like shots. Like, I understand. He goes, oh, well, I don't know if I want to do it. I was like, okay, well, here's what could happen if you don't.
Mm-hmm.
And his mind is just all over the place, of course, not being logical right now. And he was like, well, I don't know what to choose. Like, it's okay. It's going to hurt for like 2 seconds and then you're going to be fine. And what happens right after? He's like, oh yeah, I'm actually glad I did that. That's just like one example.
Right.
I'm not even saying like, hey, go get vaccinated. Like, this is just an example that I'm using today. But there's so many situations where we find ourselves in that kind of predicament, like when it comes to arguing with your spouse too. And it's like, okay, are you going to cave into your emotions and react to what your partner is doing? Or are you going to be like, is what I want to do in this moment going to help us in the long run?
Yeah.
Or should I actually face how I'm feeling and share it so that we can move forward? So all that to say, the more time you can spend to learn more about yourself, the more you will be grateful with the decisions that you're making when it comes to all areas of your life. And so if you are wanting to learn more about how to empower yourself when it comes to financial literacy, how to empower yourself when it comes to your relationship with money, Megan has a podcast. Can you tell us more about it?
Yeah, absolutely. The podcast is called Money Isn't Scary. I've been doing it now for 4 years. So
wow, that's amazing.
I have a lot of episodes. So go check it out. You can get it anywhere you listen to podcasts. It's a combination of my personal experiences and my stories. And I truly believe that what's personal is universal. So I try to share my experiences and my stories and what I'm going through in hopes that other women out there will relate. And then I also have some great interviews. Actually, I mentioned Kristen Neff. I spoke with one of the screenwriters for the movie Inside Out, which is an incredible episode.
Ooh.
So go back and check those out. There's some really cool conversations that I've had with people sharing their personal experiences as well as their guidance and expertise around creating a healthy relationship with ourselves as well as relationship with money.
Amazing. So other than the podcast, where's the best place for people to connect with you if they want to learn more from you?
Yeah, you can go to my website, just moneyisantscary.com. And you can also, I'm out there on Instagram at Money Isn't Scary.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Megan, for being on the show. Is there any final note that you want to leave the listeners with so that they can move forward from this episode feeling like, okay, I can do this?
Yeah, I would just say, take a deep breath, breathe, right? We often don't breathe. We're often in our heads and not in our bodies. So just breathe and know that you're going to be okay and you're not alone. And I'm here to help and always happy to just chat anytime. So, you're all good. Everyone's okay.
Yes. Thank you so much. And may this help you set your 2025 and beyond for a healthier relationship with yourself and your money. And feel free to listen to this back over and over and over again, because I know we dropped so much stuff in this episode that you may need to listen to it several times to process everything that we went through.
Yeah.
And if you know someone that could benefit from hearing this, please do her a solid and share this episode. Also, rate this podcast so that more people like you can discover this podcast and get the help that they need when it comes to money, when it comes to marriage, and when it comes to motherhood. All right. Thank you so much again, Megan, for being part of the show. I will catch you all back here on the next episode. Bye. That's it for this episode. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I enjoyed making it. If you did, please send me a message over on Instagram at Michelle Perta Coaching to let me know what you loved most about it. Hearing from my listeners is my absolute favorite. And if you've been loving this podcast, please leave a rating and review. This will help people like you find the show and get the help they need. Catch you here on the next episode. Bye.